I would also like to thank the organizers for the invitation. I thought I'd be rather practical in my message. I come from a company that is involved in this field, and I will give you some figures, some statistics. I've got some slides too, because it's difficult to talk about numbers without. So I'm going to start by who we are. We're an Australian company. We're active throughout the world. We're present in Italy. And basically, we do two things. We have two missions. Firstly, in the property field, we engage in urban regeneration projects, big ones, usually in partnership with local governments, and we regenerate urban areas, huge chunks of cities, projects that last 15, 20 years, so they're really quite big. Then we have a second line of activities which is linked to infrastructure, social infrastructure as well. So again, in public-private partnerships with governments, hospitals, schools, public buildings, and other functions which are services that are provided for citizens. Our company is active throughout the value chain of these projects. We're investors, we have technical skills, and we handle the long-term interests of our investors, which are also sovereign funds and so on. Clearly, a company that is working on projects that last for 30 years will be organized in a slightly different manner. We have a rather special relationship with young people, because if you think that we today will be planning a project which will be delivered in 30 years' time, we've got to also think of what the needs are going to be in 30 years' time. Our clients in 30 years' time will be the people who are very young today. So we have a different relationship with young people all the way from the time they're school children, really. And then we also address all the main trends, because we study the trends that will change the macroeconomic characteristics of our societies. We've always dedicated attention to sustainability, both economic, social sustainability and environmental sustainability. Here you can see our 12 aspirations. Today, in particular, we will be dealing with employment for youth and first access to jobs by young people. I wanted to bring you 5 examples here. Rather different experiences, but I wanted to give you some concrete examples on how our different projects in different countries in the world, how we addressed issues related to unemployment, to access to jobs, and to training in our major projects. Our advantage is that our financial scale is huge, because when you're talking about a project that lasts for an entire generation, major infrastructure projects, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. And this allows us, because of the duration of the project, to organize ourselves, bearing in mind these issues in a very detailed manner. Now, the examples. This one is an Australian example, a finance project in partnership with the government for the construction of a new hospital called in Sunshine Coast in Australia, where we created a hub of interchange, of exchange between public, private, and training. So in a single place where in the project, and this hub became the setting for people, the environment for people, whether they needed training, whether they needed a job, whether they were offering a job. It was the same platform for all, where they could all have an exchange of needs. 85% of jobs were given to the local community. 19% of these people were previously unemployed. and 11% of these people were young people under the age of 25. So we have great attention to creating these environments where demand and supply can come into contact and talk to each other. Financial resources are made available, but it's the human resources that are fundamental for these projects. So bring together demand and supply, we found, is something that really works. Another project, which is also huge, more than $6 billion, regeneration of a whole chunk of the city of Sydney. This is a partnership with the government. And here, what was created was a center similar to the one we've seen earlier, but which focused on two aspects. One was training, and we realized that it was necessary to support young people. In Australia especially, there's a problem with Aboriginals, the original inhabitants of Australia, and the statistics of employment in our project was great. We gave more than 50% of jobs to these categories that normally have difficult access to employment. Highly significant. Then there was also the importance of giving training certificates to these people, which make access to jobs easier once they're in possession of a training certificate. Each of our projects can focus on different categories of workers. In this particular project, we concentrated our attention on the training for care of mental health and suicide prevention. In the building sector in Australia is the employment sector where is the greatest risk of suicide. So we concentrated greatly on a training for care and prevention of mental health disorders. A third project. This was done around the Olympic Games in London. We were involved in the master plan for the Olympic Village in London. We created a project which was called Beyond Sight, which now is a project in its own right, and it addressed the access to jobs of the people who were furthest at greatest distance from employment, in a sense, the people who had been unemployed for the longest time, people who are ex-convicts, or people who are today are still convicts, but helping them find jobs for when they are released, and so on. So this project is going on even well after the end of the Olympic Games. Can I ask you a question? Why this specific attention to social responsibility? Is this part of your strategy, or is it what your investors ask you to do? Well, it's both. Obviously, projects on this scale, we're touching on not just the actual building, not just the cement and the steel of the buildings. We're creating new social settings, and we want to ensure that the local communities can collaborate on the creation of these new areas of cities. And this is certainly part of the return on investment for our investors. And we have understood that the two elements cannot be separated, the physical construction and the social construction. So it's in our interest, of course, to include it in the original planning from the beginning, because that allows us to blend the two aspects better, more effectively. This further project, which was in Kent, in the county of Kent, which in the 1990s was rather an area of where there was critical levels of unemployment. We here were able to create 30,000 jobs from the 1990s onwards. This is another topic that shows that our projects are not just temporary, they become structural. In Italy, you're working in Treviso. Yes, our last project is in Treviso, in Italy. And here I'd like to go back to some of the things that have already been said by the previous speakers, and by Douglas Hickey in particular, and the Undersecretary. This is a finance project. We have obtained the commission for the building of the hospital in Treviso. What we started doing was still at the initial stages, is to rethink the financial model of the project. Instead of just going to banks and sign a contract to collect some money from the banks, we've involved the banks in a mechanism so that this finance could be a more targeted financial project to allow the territory, the local community, to participate so that there could be a dialogue with the citizens so that the citizens themselves can contribute to the financing of the project that is going to be built in their midst. And this could be based on the savings of the local community, and we call this circular economy, as it were, so that they can be invested, these savings, in an impact fund, which is a venture capital fund, which has a specific mission on the community. And this fund would allow for an investment in the entrepreneurships, in young people in particular, in Treviso, because there are lots of young entrepreneurs in the city and the province of Treviso. So we will be investing in young people in order to create businesses that can contribute to the completion of the project. Apart from the hospital, there will be all the other supporting services and activities, because the hospital has a very broad range of surrounding activities. Banks have participated in this. The Impact Fund is an equity fund which will invest in social businesses, sustainable businesses with returns on investment. And so here it would be nice to take the further step and have an involvement of the government, who could perhaps recognize this virtuous circle. I think this is a circular economy with a participation of the public, and which is reinvests in the community, and this could perhaps actually benefit from some tax incentives, so that the specific profits could be reinvested in young people and young entrepreneurs, and then we could close the circle finally. Well, thank you very much, RUCKSTUHL.